It's really nice to be here today because it's not very often that somebody says to me that they want me to talk to young people, because I'm the Chief Executive of Pieta House. You know who Pieta House are? So we stop suicide. That's our job, to stop suicide and to stop self-harm. So it's not very often that people say, will you talk to young people about it? And so it's a wonderful opportunity to look out at young people and to be able to, I suppose, talk honestly about how irresponsible and how inconsistent and how inconsiderate and how selfish adults can be. And I suppose you're used to hearing some of those words related to young people, but I'm going to just give you a little bit of truth about what it is to be an adult and what we've done. Because the reality is I want to talk to you about fractures, and I want to talk to you about how my generation and the older generations inherited a world that has fractures in it, that has cracks. And I'm not sure that we as adults have done enough to try and mend those cracks and to try and fix our problems. In fact, I think if you look at the news, you'll see that what we adults do is we add to them. We put more pressure on the cracks. We put more pressure on the fractures. We build walls. We reestablish borders. We come up with new definitions that help us define who is us and who is them. And for me and for us at Pieta House, that's a big problem, because the distinction between us and them is what leads people to the doors of Pieta House. Because the further we acknowledge who we are and we acknowledge who they are, we literally push people further away from us. And it makes sense that sometimes if we push those people further and further and further, we can push them off the edge. And that's when somebody becomes suicidal or engages in self-harm. And so we need to do something around creating a world where there's effectively no them and there's only us. But that the us that we have is a beautiful rainbow mix of all sizes and shapes and colors and creeds, and where we accept each other. Very often you'll hear people talking about, I want a more tolerant Ireland. Well, I can honestly tell you I have no interest in seeing a tolerant Ireland, because a tolerant Ireland allows all of the negativity to exist. We can tolerate Nazism, but it still exists. Acceptance is about truly knowing who we are, truly knowing who other people are, and accepting who they are and accepting the difference. I want you to imagine a cracked plate. Can you imagine a cracked plate in your head? You all know what it looks like. It's still a plate, but there's all these little lines of cracks and fractures all over it. Now, we know that if you have a cracked plate, it's still going to work. You'll still be able to put food on it. You'll still be able to eat off it. But we also know that if you turn it over and you start pushing on it, you're going to make the cracks bigger. And eventually, if you keep pushing, you're going to break it, and it's going to smash into smithereens. And the problem with us as people is we have an awful habit of trying to identify the weaknesses and the fractures in other people, and then exploiting those fractures and those weaknesses for our own gain. And that's called bullying. And people who do that are called bullies. And it happens everywhere. It happens with young people and it happens with adults. But one of the things that I know to be true and you know to be true is that if we can acknowledge ourselves, what we perceive to be our own fractures or our own weaknesses, or what other people perceive to be our weaknesses and our fractures, if we can get those and acknowledge those and work on them and support each other, we can become stronger together. And we can turn what is a perceived weakness into a very, very real strength. And this stage has shared people like Panty Bliss yesterday, who was able to talk about what other people perceived as her weakness, that she has turned into a strength that has not only benefited herself, but has benefited us as a country. Philly McMahon has just left the stage. He's able to talk about how people perceive the weaknesses in his family, in his community, the issues that he has had to face. And he has been able to turn that into a cause for good that you come and listen to and acknowledge, and you'll be able to be stronger through that. Now, in Pieta House, we believe that one of the biggest causes of these fractures and one of the biggest causes of these weaknesses is stigma. And stigma comes from an ancient Latin word that means putting a label on someone else. It's literally taking a hot iron and branding someone. Branding them as different. And that's the racism the racism, homophobia, transphobia, body shaming. These are the stigmas that I'm talking about. I'm not necessarily talking about the stigma of mental health, but the stigmas that lead people to that point. What's really interesting is the Japanese have this ancient art form. I want you to think of the cracked plate again. And it's called kintsugi. And thousands of years ago, they decided that they would take broken clay, so broken plates, broken cups, broken pots, and they would put them all together and they would weld them together with solid gold, molten gold. And what they would effectively do is create a plate that is now fixed, that is stronger than it ever was before because it doesn't have fractures, it has solid gold, and something that is much more beautiful than it ever was. They took a plate, they'd eat your dinner off, and they turned it into a work of art. And what we try and do at Pieta House is work with people to identify what your weaknesses are, what you think your weaknesses are, and help you turn them into strengths. And say to you, it's okay for you to then celebrate your new strength. It's okay for you to do a bit of kintsugi on yourself and show people that what was perceived as a weakness is not only a strength, but it is also beautiful. It's also very powerful. One of the difficulties is, as adults, we're going to hand you this world. It's going to be yours. It is yours already, but you're going to be in charge of it very soon. And I think, if we're honest, the world is kind of at a tipping point. I think we're at a point where there are enough fractures, and if we keep building walls, if we keep identifying who doesn't belong to us, if we keep pushing people away, we create a really damaged world or potentially a broken world. So I'm going to do a little bit of physics. Do any of you know physics? I failed physics, but anyway, I'm going to do a little experiment. A tipping point, right? One of the rules of thumb is the tipping point is if I take my finger and I begin to push this, right? There's a point. It's not here yet. We know what's going to happen if I keep pushing, don't we? Yep. If we continue to push other people, if we continue to push society, we'll break it. But the other interesting thing about a pushing or tipping point is it's a defined point. There's a point at which I can keep pushing and I know it's going to fall over. But to bring back from the tipping point, all I have to do is release pressure. And if I release pressure consistently, it comes back to a stable state. So the world that we're giving you, while it's fractured, it isn't broken. The world that we're giving you is a world that you, if you cease to apply pressure to yourselves, if you cease to apply pressure to other people, if you cease to apply pressure to society, and if you focus on resolving issues, you can really create a whole new world. And so, my last tip is to create that new world. Be kinder to yourself. Don't apply that pressure. Be kinder to each other. Don't apply pressure. Don't try and identify what differentiates you from other people. Don't compare yourself to other people. Don't compare other people to you, because it's not going to help. All you're going to do is push further and further onto that plate, and you're going to push those cracks until they break. So be kinder and do that. I need to apologize on behalf of older people for giving this world to you in a fractured state, for probably adding more fractures to it than we had when we inherited it. But I do think that you have the power and you have the will and you have the drive to push forward. Have any of you done Darkness into Light? You can put your hand up. Good. That's a lot of people. Taking part in Darkness into Light. Talking about homelessness. Talking about mental health. Talking about issues that impact. You are building a more resilient you than I was when I was your age. And you will build a society that is stronger and more powerful for younger people coming after you. And so the last thing I want to say is, I was thinking about Generation X and Y and Z and all these things, and I don't know which one I am, and I know that you're Generation Z. And I know that Z is the last letter in the alphabet. But I do think that Generation Z is a potential new beginning for Ireland, for Europe, for the world. So it is your world. It is fractured. You know how to fix it. So I would say go and do it. And thank you.